Hello, Sioux Falls. Thanks for joining us for Planning Preview for the month of July 2021. This month's Planning Commission meeting will be held at July 7th at the Carnegie Town Hall in downtown Sioux Falls at 6 p.m. As always, we encourage members of the public to come to speak on agenda items, and we'll get to those in a moment here. But we also strongly encourage members of the public to come and talk about anything planning and zoning related that's not on our agenda. We always love to hear from the citizens, so please come down on July 7th at 6 p.m. Today with me is Jason Bieber from the City Planning Office. How are you doing today, Jason?
Great. It's a great day outside today.
Yeah, it is. Jason, we're about halfway through the year. What are you seeing from planning and zoning perspective for kind of a mid-year report?
Well, honestly, from our perspective, we're maybe slowing down just a little bit on applications, but our building permits and development stuff is still way higher than last year where we set a record. So
yeah.
Still super busy. But.
Great to hear. So let's, we got a few items to discuss here, so let's get in and we'll talk about the first one right away. It's a rezone from single family residential to the O Office District. It's at 6509 South Cliff Avenue, which is kind of by the USF Sports Complex.
Yep, exactly, just to the west of that. So there's an existing church there, and then to the southwest corner of the church, there's an existing office lot. And really what they're doing is that office lot is going to buy a little chunk from the church, a little triangular piece, to kind of construct an office building there. Just need a little bit more room there. So
okay, makes sense. Sounds like a good project. Let's go on to the next item, a rezone from C3 Commercial Community District to C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District. That's at 4501 East 57th Street, so kind of over by Greystone. This looks like they just want a little more density.
Yep. So just to the northeast of that big Greystone apartment complex, we rezoned the majority of a parcel probably about 3 months ago from Ag to C2. They're going to do a strip mall, but I guess they needed a little bit more of that. So instead of just having the C3 and C2 on one lot, we thought it'd be better just to kind of clean it up. So
okay, understood. Yeah, always good to kind of clean up some of those lines when we can. So next up on the list is a conditional use permit for on-sale beverage establishment within 500 feet of a sensitive use. That's located at 523 West 10th Street, so kind of by 10th and Duluth area. What are they doing there?
Yep, correct. Just kind of a restaurant that wants to serve beer and wine and that kind of stuff. We kind of see quite a few of these, as we know, with those commercial corridors in the core, 10th Street, Minnesota, 41st. You do have those commercial retail businesses, but they back up to single family or twin homes there. So typically we see a lot of these conditional uses to make sure that it's a good fit there, and then the neighbors are kind of aware what's going on. So.
Yep, that is one of those great things about those conditional use permit. Gets the process through so people can kind of come in and give public input. So
yep,
we like
exactly.
to see that. Next up is another conditional use permit, but this is for an increase in a billboard size up to a maximum of 672 feet. 1101 South Lyons Avenue, so it's kind of off of I-29 by the Gage Brothers site, and we don't see a lot of these conditional use permits before us, so tell us what they're doing here.
Yep, so there's an existing billboard there that I believe is around the 280 square feet. They want to remove that one and put up a new one, and they want to go to a maximum of that 672 square feet. So probably about 5 years ago or so, we did kind of the billboard opportunity district. We had a billboard study group, and this is still one of those areas that's within that district that we still allow billboards to go up. So
okay, very good. So do they currently have a conditional use permit? They just need to extend the height, or do they not have one? They don't need one.
They didn't need one for the existing one. For these, we kind of have that conditional use built in, and really, if you're going to put a billboard maybe bigger than 280 square feet, it probably is better to be located on interstate, faster traffic, so maybe it's warranted. There's several billboards along that stretch, and so we're kind of doing a little bit of research and to see what are the other existing ones and kind of make them comparable, make this comparable. So not 100% sure they'll get the 672, or we'll recommend 672, but we're going to kind of see that research and figure out to make it consistent with some of the other ones we've approved along there.
Okay, interesting. Next up are a couple items located out by the Discovery District. They're both at 4100 West 60th Street. We've got a preliminary subdivision plan, but then we've also got the rezone that goes with it. And the rezone's going from Commercial Regional District to the I-1 Light Industrial and I-2 Heavy Industrial Districts. Tell us about this project.
Yeah, so this is kind of the area just east of Walmart on 60th Street. We know that that area started to kind of blow up over the last couple of years, specifically Foundation Parks to the north, and just a lot of the other industrial uses that have gone out there. So this parcel is actually zoned all C4. What the applicant's looking to do is keep that frontage on 60th Street as commercial. And then as you go north, kind of a little bit north of where Glanbia and those other industrial parks are, industrial uses are, kind of get just some additional light industrial areas, which that whole kind of area by the Marion and the interstate is light industrial.
Yeah, just kind of south of the interstate there. There is quite a bit of industrial in that area already. So. Very good. Next on our list is a rezone from RS Single Family Residential, that's the Suburban District, to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District. This one's at 735 South Glendale Avenue over by Sanford. What are they looking to do with this project?
Yep, this is kind of one of those great things that CCOG does, and so they were gifted a house from, I believe it was from Sanford, one of the ones they either had to move or tear down or as part of their expansion plans. And what CCOG really does is they get these houses and then they move them onto lots and sell them, accessible housing to more affordable people. This lot actually is pretty small. I think it's only like 35 feet wide. So they're going to rezone to that traditional district that we created as part of Shea Places to allow these infill lots and not be able to reuse a house, put it in a core neighborhood, and hopefully get somebody their first house. So.
Okay, cool. Very interesting project. Let's move on to the next one, an alternative site plan for an alternative buffer yard located at 113 North St. Paul Avenue. This one looks like the Children's Home Society's back. We've had a few items for them because it's such a big project and it's on bare ground, so it's understandable. But over at the School for Deaf property, tell us about this.
Yeah, so that parcel, we have seen them probably 2 or 3 times already, it seems like, but that parcel is adjacent to single family on the north and east side, and those buffer yards are pretty extensive for a use of this kind. So really what they're looking at doing is they got to have some detention ponds in the actual front yard setbacks of those. And instead of having fences kind of along the street and make it look like a fortress in theory, what they want to do is kind of increase the green space because of those detention ponds and really focus more on landscaping than doing a fence or a large berm that they can't do there. So.
Okay, yeah, and we love seeing some of those landscaping projects that really beautify buildings and really tie into the neighborhood when we can. So.
Yeah, and just instead of slapping on a 4-foot wood fence that sometimes they just don't work that well. So.
Sure. Alrighty, let's move on to our next item. So rezone from single family residential suburban district to the RD1 twin home duplex suburban district. This is at the southwest corner of East 6th Street and North Wildcat Drive. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so this is, if you haven't been out there, this is kind of on Arrowhead Parkway between Veterans Parkway and 6 Mile on the east. And then north of what Clint Ackerman's doing, that Will's Edge, Preston has done Mystic Heights out there, and that area is just blown up with houses. So he's looking at just rezoning some single family to twin homes. It's adjacent to some existing live work land, so it's a little bit better of a transition. And I think he has some users that are looking for twin homes up in that specific development. So.
Okay, very good. Next on the list is a rezone from C2 Neighborhood Commercial District to Live Work District. That's at the southeast corner of South Tallgrass Avenue and West 69th Street. Tell us about what they're doing in this fast developing part of town.
Yep. So this is right across kind of from the medical campuses we have out there. Right next to there's actually a radio station out there. But what they're looking at doing is zoning this live work and doing the majority of it is kind of apartments, getting some more apartment uses out there, but still have some options on the corner for maybe an office or a small medical area. So. Okay,
sounds good. Next, we've got an alternative site plan to allow for a parking reduction for a medical clinic. This is located at 5900 East 26th, so we're in the Dolly Farm area, and I know that Avera is building their clinic out here, which was just recently announced. So tell us about what they're they're looking to do here.
Yep, they just announced this one. So what they need to do now, and we've done this for a couple of the Avera clinics, like the one on 26 in Marion, the one on 69th in Cliff. Their, new model, they just don't need as much parking as maybe our ordinance requires, with more remote visits, call-in visits. And so they provided us with the information, what they've done with all the other clinics, giving us a breakdown of what they think they need for staff, visitors, doctors, that kind of stuff. And given us that information, and then provided some additional parking above that. Okay. And it's less than what is required by ordinance, but it still seems like it's way more than they probably need. So.
Yeah, and if it's something that makes sense, then it's
Absolutely.
less pavement, which leads to usually more landscaping and everything else.
Yep,
which is good
absolutely.
As well,
so it's worked well with those other clinics we've done. We haven't had any issues. So.
Okay. Very good. Let's move on to our last one. Rezone from the RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban District to the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density District. That's at the northwest corner of East 61st and Sycamore Avenue. So we're back by Greystone again.
Yep, just to the south of Greystone. These are kind of some interesting looking. They look kind of like townhomes, but they're not going to split them off, so we got to call them apartments then. The garage on the first floor and then 2 levels above that, and so that's why we got to really get to that RA2, because essentially they're 3 stories in height, but they're putting in 4-unit buildings. So it's kind of an interesting looking little project. We'll see how it looks out there when it gets done. But
very good. Well, thanks for sticking around with us, Jason, and talking about these. It sounds like it's going to be a good meeting, so
yeah.
We'll look forward to it. And thank you for watching the first half of our show. Please stick around. We got a great second half for you. Albert Schmidt, urban planner with the City of Sioux Falls, will be with us, and we're going to talk about the new floodplain ordinances and what that means for you.
Hello and welcome to today's Maintenance Minute. My name is Seth and I'm here with Bruce. We're housing specialists with the City of Sioux Falls. Bruce, I have an older home with a block foundation, and every single spring I seem to get water coming into my basement. How do I take care of that?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can take a look at that. You can check to see if you've got proper slope away from your house with the grade around the outside. That's one way to fix it. Another way is to do what we've got here, to go around the inside of the foundation and put in drain tile. Come in around, they take the cement out all the way around the perimeter in here, put drain tile down, pour concrete back over the top, put a sump pit in, and then you can discharge the water outside of your home. And that should hopefully take care of any groundwater issues or water coming in from the outside.
So the drain tile collects all the water, drains it into this pit, and the pump actually pumps it outside.
Right. Yep, it's pumped to the outside. There's a hose that's connected out there that can be moved around your yard. Some people use it to try and water their trees or their plants. The biggest thing is get it as far away from your house as possible, but not out onto the street or across the sidewalks.
Great. Well, there you go, folks. If you have an issue with water in your basement, sump pump is the way to go. If you'd like to see if one of our city programs can help you out, call 367-8180 or check us out online at siouxfalls.org.
Welcome back, Sioux Falls. Thanks for sticking around for the second half of our program. I'm joined by Albert Schmidt today, urban planner, City of Sioux Falls. How are you doing today, Albert?
It's a great day to be alive.
It is, and it's a great day to talk floodplain ordinances, and that's what we got you in for today. And I know, Albert, we recently passed some changes. We've got a little bit some tweaks and revisions coming down the road. Let's talk real broad, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty. Talk to me about what our floodplain ordinances do generally for our town.
No, great question. So for the city, floodplain ordinances tend to try to help us regulate and restrict development in areas where people generally get impacted more, either during a flood event. So when like in 2019, we had all that water come through town, trying to keep people out of those areas so that we have less buildings and people get affected, but also to on an everyday basis, like so people aren't getting charged flood insurance rates that they shouldn't be able to afford, because like when you're building a floodplain, those rates become significantly higher.
Yep.
And so trying to help people out that way, both financially and then during the event itself.
Okay, gotcha. So a few months ago at the Planning Commission, we made some recommendations. Can you talk real quick about what those recommendations were generally?
Yeah, so back January this year, we brought it forward to the Planning Commission for recommendation. The big kind of broad side of it, and again, you can go back to that January meeting and look at the full wonderful presentation we did and the full
you
document.
did do a good job.
But the big thing that we did was, at that point in time, we looked at major things saying, all right, we have freeboard. And freeboard, for those who don't know, is that distance above the floodplain level. So floodplain level, base flood elevation, let's get a little technical, but I'll try to keep it, is basically how high do we expect water to get. And
Yeah.
so freeboard is, we're gonna make you build X amount above that. So our normal amount's 2 feet, we're recommending going to 3 feet. Since that time, we've talked with city councilors, we've talked to developers, and just trying to balance out our desire to make improvements, to protect people, to be proactive, and also trying to just take into consideration the costs and what that does to developers and the product as well. So we're trying to balance those areas out, because it's not our goal to just put a ton of regulation on everybody just for no reason.
Yep.
And so when we looked at that side of it, we said, all right, well, you have this major concern. 2 feet's still better than most of the state and most of the areas, so we're still good there. So we decided to bring that back down to 2 foot. So in January we said we're gonna go with 3 feet, but now we're gonna move it down to 2 foot. And then the other thing we brought, one of the other major things that we brought forward in there was our definitions. One of the big things that we have in there is existing structures in the floodplain. And so you're only allowed to do so much to them, both either in improvements, so like repairs, like shingles, new remodeling or inside of your house, or additions.
Okay.
So that's what they call substantial improvement, or substantial damage is the next side of it. Like a tornado comes through and destroys your house,
Yep.
or destroys half your house. So right now our definition is 50% value of that.
Okay.
We looked at that side and said, all right, let's lower that down so we can get a little bit of benefit to the FEMA process to 45, where that 45 to 50% difference, the reason why we suggested that was we really don't see any properties that really fall in there very often. I mean,
Sure.
maybe one every decade.
Small range, yeah.
Not many. So we felt that was low-hanging fruit to get us more points, to help people out and to help us try to kind of keep that buffer in that minimum standard to FEMA so we don't get in trouble. Then the other side that we did there is tracking those things. So FEMA minimum standard says over a 12-month period. And
Okay.
so we said, let's increase that. Let's do it longer.
And that's the amount of improvements over a 12-month period?
Yeah, so
or-
So for instance, if every month you're remodeling a room in your house, so that's 12 permits in a year then. We would add all those together, and that would be your total at that last
Okay,
one. So
okay.
every time you're getting a permit, we'd always add the previous ones in from the last 12 months and go, all right, here's where you're at that value-wise. So if you had a $100,000 house, you could do $50,000 worth of improvements and still be under that threshold. And so we looked at going to 45%.
Okay.
And in addition to, instead of 12 months, we were originally, when we talked to you guys, we're going to go over a 10-year period. And so we talked again, came in, and especially in the commercial side, there's really some very legitimate concerns over, we can't control how these turn over, and new tenants need new spaces, so it's a potential issue for us.
Sure.
So we looked at that, we said, all right, well, let's be a little more reasonable then, and let's at least test that out and see how that works.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
we reduced that down to 3 years instead of 10 years in
Yeah.
our recommendation.
And that's, it's so fascinating to hear you talk about this, Albert, because I know that we didn't get a ton of public input on this, which, it's noticed and everything. And, we do the best we can by getting people to come and talk to us. But this is a great way to kind of witness the flexibility that City Hall has, right? To be able to work with people. And some of those thresholds are definitely beneficial towards individuals. Some of them are changing that will be beneficial to developers. But it's a process and it's a change. And it sounds exactly like what you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we did this first, we wanted to get public input. We're like, well, this is important because this is going to affect people's lives.
It is.
The builders, every aspect of it, it really could affect. Luckily, we don't have that many properties in Sioux Falls that are in the floodplain, but the ones that are get impacted. And so when we did our original reach out, we did like 1,300 mailers to properties that are in or portion of the property are in the floodplain, and we heard back from like 26 of those 1,300, basically asking, is my property in? And so we gave them individual answers. Then we had our public hearing with Planning Commission. That was really the first time we actually had people go, oh, they're actually bringing this forward. And so
Yep.
then we actually started getting some comments after that. So that was really good, and we wanted to make sure that we took in as much public comment as we could, listened to it, considered it, and then just kind of looked at, are these appropriate changes to make in the ordinance? And ultimately, we decided that these few ones that we looked at were definitely appropriate, and we felt like they were a good way to balance out our desire to protect, but the developers and the citizens' desires to have something that makes sense and doesn't overly impact them.
Sure, and I can see why, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but the standards are very much so necessary, especially in a town like us. We've seen that a few years ago in 2019, as you mentioned, some devastating effects if things aren't, up to perhaps where they should be. And it must be a little bit tough for you because no town is exactly like Sioux Falls. So we saw the numbers. We can compare where our numbers and standards need to be, but at the end of the day, we're unique to the Sioux River and what we've got going on here. So how much do you look at other towns? Do you focus on that a lot?
Man, that's a good question. When we look at this stuff, generally speaking, we start big picture and we go, all right, what are the national gold standards for floodplain management? What really they say, hey, if you can do everything, do this. And we look at that and go, all right, so we can restrict everything. We can allow nobody to even travel in the floodplain. All right, we're good.
Yep.
No, we're not.
Yep.
So then we try to pare it down and go, all right, what are we concerned about? What have we seen? The nice thing about Sioux Falls is we've seen flooding, yes, especially like in '69 and a few other years in there. '19 was also a pretty bad year, but compared to some communities, we haven't seen nearly the flooding. We haven't seen the development in the areas that are so devastating because our forefathers really did a fairly good job of identifying these areas that were going to be impacted by these areas and either putting levees in, putting diversion channels in up on the north side, or making it parkland. Between those three things, we've really accommodated a lot of area for floodplain and mitigated a lot of those areas out of that area. So we've done a lot of work in the past that we've been lucky to, but in that same kind of idea and thought, we wanted to, with this update, try to do the next level and push that for the forward. And so one of the major things that we're adding in there that's new to the ordinance that we're hoping is beneficial really long term is a thing called compensatory storage, otherwise called comp storage.
Okay.
And so the goal there is to retain the same amount of flood capacity storage we have during a flood event. So if a flood comes down through the river and you're going to have water fill in an area, then as a flood generally goes down, then it generally kind of funnels out and gets out of the town.
Yep.
Well, that area that it fills in and sits there over time, that's generally called the flood fringe. And we want to keep the capacity in those areas so that there's room for that water to sit there. The idea here is that if we limit that room down and narrow it down over time, that water has to go somewhere quickly.
Sure.
And so generally what that does is it forces water through the channelization quicker and faster, causing more erosion, more damage that way. So we put in there the comp storage requirement saying, if you're going to put fill in the floodplain, like let's say 100 cubic feet of fill, we want you in the same general area and same basin to create 100 cubic feet of new area for that water to go.
Okay,
so that you can
it needs to go somewhere, yeah.
And we don't want to tell people like you can't do anything with your land. That's not fair. That's not pro-development. And we try to help development out as best we can, but we want it to be smart.
Yep.
And so that's kind of one of the bigger changes going on. We haven't heard any major issues by a lot of people on that issue, and I think that's because when you just think about that side, just allowing that water still has some place to go, it's basically me saying, I can't push my water off onto you. And I think a lot of people in South Dakota intuitively go, yeah, I shouldn't be able to be affected by my neighbors. So I think that generally makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it is amazing. Those are some of the things that we need because we do need development. We can't not do anything ever in those areas. And I think Sioux Falls has been set up so many years ago. People forget that there could have been big buildings and structures right along the entire river like that. And we don't have that in a lot of spaces because people thought ahead and said, hey, let's put a park here and let's do our trail system, and all those things help push the buildings back so we don't have to deal with some of these issues, right?
Amen. I mean, there's the forethought there. The bike trail system itself is a huge side of it. And, for us, doubling those things up makes perfect sense because it's really nice if you can use the bike trail all year round. I mean, that's ideal. But at the same time, if something's going to flood, let a bike trail flood.
Yeah.
I mean, we can fix that a lot quicker than we can fix the downtown. Just ask downtown Cedar Rapids. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of money to fix buildings and infrastructure that way.
Yep.
A bike trail system, you might get section wash out here and there, but you can fix that pretty relatively easily.
Yep. So these ordinances, I know the importance of them, and then like we said, we didn't get a lot of public input last time. Explain to our viewers why these changes are important to them and why it matters.
So, for the average person, you think about floodplain once every few years, and if you're lucky, you don't even think about it at all. And so for us, the importance is trying to protect the citizens. And so if you're looking at buying a house, our ordinances can hopefully help reduce rates of insurance that you might have out there, but also make you feel safe that, or knowledge of security that, your house is built likely you're going to either know that there potentially could be an issue, or that you know that your house is built in a way so that if flooding does occur, it likely won't affect you in such a severe manner. So that's kind of the main key for us, is protecting people from the unknown and the things that hopefully they don't need to think about a lot. And so one of the things that we look at is in 19 of those neighborhoods that flooded, some houses really got hit hard. I mean, basements collapsed in on them, a lot of mold damage, things like that going on.
Devastating, yep.
And other houses in the same neighborhood that were built up higher just didn't see any damage, really. And again, you attribute that, a lot of the times when you look at that, that's because the newer ones that were built to our standard really fared pretty well. And so that's why these really matter. And you know, it does cost more to build those, but at the same time, the headache, the hassle, that's not there when you build higher. And then the annual insurance rates that you have to pay if you have a flood insurance mortgage and you're required to have those by your bank, they're typically going to be less too. So you should save money on a yearly basis.
Very good. Yeah, and Albert, thank you so much for coming, because I guarantee that everybody learned so much about floodplain management and our ordinances, and I know there's so much more to learn. Is there information on the website about this that people can take a look at?
The best spot, great question to go to, is siouxfalls.org/floodplain, and that'll take you to our floodplain page. We have our current ordinance on that page, also new maps, things like that. And then if you want to watch our last meetings, again, January was our Planning Commission meeting. Our July 6th meeting is our second reading coming up here, so you can watch that live. Otherwise, our first reading was June 15th. And otherwise, we'll be happy to answer your questions. You can call our office, 367-8603 is my direct line. If you have any questions floodplain related, we're happy to take it.
Awesome.
Thank you for my time.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great. We love to hear it. We love to have you in, Albert. Thank you again. Appreciate it. And thank you for sticking around, Sioux Falls. Please come to our Planning Commission meeting July 7th at 6 p.m. in Carnegie Town Hall.